Hello, welcome to Rebuilding the Perfect Beast. This is a continuation of the Bosch 800 series. This thing is in sad shape, so we're going to have to do a bunch of work on it. So it's got problems. It's got a leaky heat pump water outlet, and it's also got now a failed heater, amongst other things. I wanted to first show you how to get the machine out. If you look underneath, there are two tabs, one there, one there. I've already got the screws out, but there'll be two Phillips or Torx head screws, which keeps this thing from sliding out. It keeps the whole machine tied to this metal rail that's on the underneath of the countertops. So what we can do now, you can just pull it straight on out. So these are on rollers, so you can just, it's really easy to get out and they're very lightweight. So what happens on these machines, or on this one in particular, a lot of them get E15s, which is the water float is getting triggered. So if you can see I stuffed a towel in here, there's another little trick to do. There, right there, this is the float, this piece right here. It moves up and down on this float switch. And I've already cleaned this thing out, but what happens is, if you look straight back above the float switch, you see a bunch of residue in there. There's a gasket in there. The pump goes into this well, and it was leaking from there and dripping down. You can kind of see where it's been leaking. That's a pretty good clue of what's going on in here. But this had a really slow leak, and it eventually stopped. So a lot of times pipes and stuff like that, if you keep hoovering it out and emptying it, it will eventually stop up with particles and just calcification, and it'll just quit leaking, which this one did. But when you get the E15 code, what you're going to want to do is you want to pull the machine out. You lift this insulation up here, and you'll see water in here. So you take a paper towel, sponge, whatever you want to do, and just clean it out. And you get it completely cleaned out. That'll at least get the machine going, and it'll empty, and you can run it. Now, if it's a really slow leak, you can continue to just pull this out into dipper it or mop the water out of there and just keep it dry. And eventually, if you're lucky, it'll quit leaking, and then you can continue to use the machine. I wanted to show you one other thing, and that's this well. Underneath here, you want to turn this nut counterclockwise, pull this out, and there's a sump in there. You want to take like a turkey baster and just get that thing dry. So every time you run the machine, empty the sump and get the water out of it, and that'll keep the water from leaking out of the machine when it's sitting. So those little tricks will help you keep going. There's some people that say, pull the machine out and tilt it, tip it upside down or tip it over. Don't do that, because all you're doing is making this water run in all kinds of weird places. Just clean it, then do the things I said, keeping the well dry. You want to, if you're getting the air, rather than turn it upside down, you go in here and you dry this out with some paper towels, and that's what you're supposed to do. And it's really easy to get to. So that's the E15 error and how to deal with it in the short term if you want to keep it going. I'm going to talk about the other error code this machine had, which was, first it was thrown an E4 and then an E9. The E4 is a thermal code where it's not coming up to temperature. It's getting there, but it's not there yet. So you'll see it'll look like it's working and it's hot, but it'll say E4. And in the Bosch notes, service notes, it just really cryptic. It just says, this is tricky or something like that. I'm like, well, thanks. It doesn't really help me out, but that's what's going on. And the E4 will lead to an E9, which is a heater failure. So I want to show you where the heater is. So same deal. On the other side, there's this insulation. So a couple things on this machine. The heater is right here. It's these connectors. The two reds and the green. The green is the ground, the two reds are the heater. So what you do is you pull this connector off. We'll show this later, but you pull the connector off and you measure between the two red pins, and there should be, I think, 9 or 18 ohms, depending upon if it's 115 or 220. And this one was open, so we know we got a bad heater and we got a bad gasket. So I'm gonna shotgun this. I'll show you the whole rebuild. I'm gonna replace all the parts in this machine except for the circuit board. The circuit board, by the way, is here. It's right here underneath this cover. So if you ever need it, it's right here. It's very easy to get to. So you just pull the machine out. It's all right here. Very easy if you ever need to do circuit board checks and everything. So that's it until we start removing the machine. Okay, so we're gonna come over here. So the first thing you want to do once you get the unit out is to open the door, take this filter and screen out, Then you want to take the upper and lower rack out. The only trick, the lower one comes out real easy. The upper one, you got to press these two guys in and finagle it out on these, across these two little prongs. You can, once you get these eased out and it clears this first catch, then you just sort of angle it up and down, and eventually you can get it up and off its track. So that, you got to take these baskets loose. The next thing was kind of blowing my mind is back here in the back. I was like, okay, well, I've got this general purpose manual or service manual, but it's not exactly for this model. It's for all the models. So it was a little confusing, but with this tank, I think it's like an expansion tank or some nonsense, heat exchanger or something. You know, it's got alternating clips here for these hoses. So I thought, well, maybe I could just take the hoses off. There's a couple of O-rings in there. I'm probably gonna have to replace those now since I messed with it. So then I'm like, well, how do I get this off? So man, it's really confusing if you read the service manual, but this thing is held on by, you come around this way. This thing is held in by this like inlet nut over here. So there's a trick. One thing that's useful in the service manual is they say to make a witness mark. So you take your Sharpie, and I made a mark on the stainless steel cover and on this, just so that, I think it's to prevent over tightening it, although I'm not going to do that, but I don't, there, maybe that's important. But anyway, take a pair, it's kind of tight. So I just took a pair of needle nose pliers and used them as like, you know, pin joint pliers and just spun this off. So take this cap off, and then in theory, this guy then comes off. So then this comes off. So now we're at a point where this is off, and you could, I don't know if you can clean it or not, but I'll probably take this off and I'll show you how to do that later. But so this is all a big sequence of events. So now we're ready to put this latch the front door. Now it keeps, all this stuff keeps saying for you to keep taking the front door off, but I don't see that. So put a piece of carpet in here. Just tip it over and see. Now the trick is on this unit now is to try to get this base plate off. So this is the business end of it, where everything's happening. There's two torque screws here. Pull those out, and then that's the, so you can see it's loose. So that's the back half, and this tank was getting held up, oops, on this tank. So now that can come loose. Okie doke, pan is off. It was easier than I thought to get this off, because the instructions looked really crazy, but it's pretty straightforward. So once we get this, you know, we got this tank off of here. The only trick was there was a this hose right here. You had to use a heat gun and just get this. You had to heat this because it's been on there so long. Put a little bit of heat on there to get it nice and warm. Then you can take the clamp and pull it off. Otherwise, it gets stuck on the hose barb connector. But these just came right off. No trouble. This guy, there's a little, there's a harness here. Careful, there's a little catch right inside here. If you can see it, press that little tab in. Then you can pull the connector out. If you don't press that little lock tab out, you'll break the connector, so don't do that. And you can see all the gorp that was in here from when everything was leaking, and heat element, I guess, melted down or whatever. This guy, this is the float switch. Again, you gotta stick a screwdriver in here and unlock one side, and then it'll pop out. But now that you see it, you can figure out how to press these in. That you press them in and then they come out. So that's the hidden catch. So now I've got everything. I've got access to everything. Oh, one other thing, as you're pulling this out, there is on either side, these front, the two screws hold the back, and the fronts, this slot slips in here, there's a tab. And they talk about you have to pound that tab in with a screwdriver and hammer to make sure it's flush. Otherwise it sticks out and it latches everything in place and you can't pull it out. So drive those in on both sides, then this will come off. You got to take this loose, the electronics module, pull a plug out. It's got a couple of catches, and it just slides out from the slot. It's really, the catches are here and here. These little tits right here. So real easy to get that loose. Then we're out. Didn't have to take the door off. You just lay it over on a piece of carpeting, and it's actually pretty straightforward. It's pretty minimal. So that's pretty cool. So now we get the fun part of replacing all this stuff. Okay, now we're at this stage where got everything off. So go ahead and, using the tricks we said earlier, pop all these wiring harness connectors loose from this guy. It's already off, but I'll show you how it goes. You work on it, take the plugs out, come out from this side. You want to put this thing on its back. And then before you do that, you got to take this upper tray off, take this guy out, and then see these metal clips that are on the bottom. You have to just gently pry on those metal clips, and then this, there's two of them, one up here, one down there, and then this whole assembly comes out. So you have to have this out of the way, get it out of there for inspection and cleaning. It's kind of strange. There's only two fasteners up here. This guy, two Torx heads, and that whole assembly just drops out as soon as you do that. Seems a little skimpy, but that's the way they did it. So there's actually two of the other ones. There's two that go through here, I guess, and maybe they hold it all together, press it in, but seems a little weird. But so there's four total really, but these don't seem to be doing as much as the other two. Any rate, so that's how you get it all the way down. So now we're gonna, in addition to taking all that stuff out and inspecting and cleaning, I'm gonna go through, I bought all new seals. So there's a door seal that's probably wasted. There's these outer seals, that one already fell off. It's some kind of strip. There's all kinds of gunk and stuff in here. And it's pretty old, but those gaskets need to be replaced, and I'll show you how to do that once I get further along. Okay, moving on to the trim and the clean out. These are the three trim pieces. Can't remember what they call them, like moldings or something. Those just unclip. Or the ones on the side slide out, the top one just slides on. So pull those off. If you want to replace them, you probably should. You could clean them. They tend not to get bunged up, so either clean them or get new ones. Moving on to the main washer cavity or housing, whatever you call it. This thing was unbelievably grody. So once you pull the gasket out from around it, there's a door gasket. I showed you that earlier. That's the channel it runs in. Over time, the gasket shrinks. It gets just food particles and stuff in it. It is freaking nasty. You gotta pull it out, spray this Lysol up in there. Got a nice brush from my wife's makeup thing or whatever hair thing that she had. It's awesome for cleaning these channels in there, but you gotta get it all out and, you know, careful. Keep that piece of electronics on top. Don't get that wet. Put a bag over it probably if you're not careful. You gotta get in here and blast out these channels. So, again, brilliant engineering. These things are hollow, right? So all the way back in these slides, it gets food particles built up. And so I just blasted it out with a hose and some, brushes and everything. Got all that. Back in the back, there's seals that tie the whole thing together. You got to clean those. These areas get really, really nasty. These hinges around here, because that's where the seal leaks, both sides. I tipped it up like this so it would run out, and then I could. This is all watertight anyway, and so there's no chance of getting anything wet this way. You gotta blast it out with a hose, because it's just not going to come clean. So finally, it got it clean. It's unbelievably dirty. This is bad. You got to get around here, clean that. It stays wet all the time, so it doesn't hurt if you scrub it. But then don't get behind the front of it or anything electronics. But you can keep it all together and do a good job cleaning it. Now I'm just letting it dry. It's a really nice, beautiful Sunday. Very dry, so we'll let that dry and move on to the pump and sump assembly. A couple other pieces. Don't forget to clean this. This is your screen and filter. Filter's off. I'm going to please replace that, but I think I bought a new one, but I cleaned it just in case because it's still good, but it gets really dirty too. Look behind it, all these little cracks and stuff, it just accumulates. This is clean now, so it's good. Here is the original problem. This caused all the trouble, I think, on this whole machine. If you can see, hard to see down in there, but you see all that stuff that's around there. That's where it started leaking. That's where through the E15 was around that stupid gasket. There's no clamp. It just shoves in there. There's no clamping force or anything. I'm going to take care of that. But and you can see down in there, if the sun's right, it just accumulated down in there. And now, this motor winding's rusty. I don't know if it had anything to do with the failure of the heater, but it sure was leaking there. And so it's like, man. So anyway, I got all this stuff. It's all new. So I'm gonna put it back together. It's pretty uneventful. Once you get it down to this point, just replace everything in here, the whole thing, all these parts. Just don't even mess with it. There's a couple little pieces in here. There's like a couple covers that you got to pull out. That's like a water turbidity sensor. I got new ones. These I didn't get new. I think they're still good. I'm gonna pull them out, and they have to be in place for it to work. I'm gonna pull these out, clean them a little bit more, and put them back in. But it was leaking around again, leaking around this gasket. It really needs sealer. So you could see gunk on the other side of this. So just, again, just, I don't know, bad design. Anyway, I'm gonna start working on that. So I started off with a new sump assembly. There's the old one sitting here for reference. I just am replacing everything on this. So this is pretty, I'm just gonna go through real quickly. This just rotates. You got to put a little bit of WD-40. I put some in a container and a little acid brush. Silicone grease or some WD-40. There's an O-ring underneath here. Just lubricate the crap out of this O-ring, get it on there, and then this piece, it just kind of presses down. It's tight fit. Press it down, and then you rotate it to where these little locking tabs engage. You could kind of see them in there. But then you just rotate it until it's locked, and then look at your old one to see how it's held in. And it's very, very tight, so you're gonna have to press, and it snaps down. It's just almost like makes you wince when it happens, but it does seem to be sealed up. So next thing to go on is this this guy here. Again, lubricate it really well. Slide it in there, rotate it till it locks in place. It's pretty easy. That's one of the pumps. This is the piece that failed, and with the heater in it. Interesting thing now they give me this little clamp. It's a very, very tiny clamp. As you can see, that now goes around there, whereas the old one, there was no clamp at all. It was just I don't know if they left it off or didn't think it was needed. But anyway, clamp's on there, so now it shouldn't leak anymore. One thing I did do, if you see, I put a little bit of silicone in there against that, where that rubber, I think that's another continuation of this gasket where it goes in the housing. I just smeared some silicone in there, just as in the outside chance that it ever did leak from there, and it's sealed up. So the only other piece that goes in here is the aqua sensor. It's a little tricky. When you put the aqua sensor in here, there's a little, I don't know if you can see it. You've got to be careful, because when you insert this clicks into a tab, but then there's one tab, you can't really see it. Once you look at it, you'll see what I mean. But there's a little tang on the inside of this aqua sensor that has to be lined up to the slot. There's a slot in the housing to this. This initially goes into the slot, so it'll clear. Then when you press it down, it then goes through and locks in place. And that's the other locking mechanism. So when I first started pressing this on, it wouldn't go on. And then it dawned on me what was going on. So yeah, just make sure the slots line up initially, then you just rotate this until this engages the tang on the pump housing, and you are good to go. These are the, I was talking about this earlier, the way to test this pump is to ohm out these two connections right here and here. It should be either 9 or 18 ohms, depending upon what country you're in. That's ground. It'll tell you if the pump is shot craps or not. So anyway, so that's this guy. I'm gonna replace the O-rings on the, I didn't buy new ones. I'm just going to get stock O-rings. Put on all these tubings, pipes, or whatever. So we'll do that, and then we'll do the rest of the assembly later. Okay, here's putting the sump and all the parts back on. First, snap this in. This piece right here. This is the sprayer distribution manifold, whatever you want to call it. Snaps in place. You'll need to do that because those two screws hold the pumping in place. So what you're going to want to do, if you get a new sump, it'll come with a gasket. I just get a new sump. I wouldn't try to replace a gasket. If you want to, fine, but it looks like a bear. They already install it. It's good to go. So then you get some WD-40, spray it, use your brush, lubricate that, probably put some silicone grease or something on it. It's tight. It's very tight. So it's around the rim of this thing, around the periphery. It seals. It's kind of a radial seal, and you have to pull it into place. You cannot push it on there. I mean, maybe you could, but I didn't want to try to break anything. So you got to follow this assembly. 1, 2, 3, 4. It says tighten the screws by hand. Do not use power. Tighten the screws in order to prevent leaking. Do it in that sequence, because what will happen is you have to draw the sump onto this flange. And it's just, like I said, it's just tight. And if you don't use lubricant, I don't know how you do it. It's just extremely, extremely tight. Bottom each one, you just put the 4 in there to hold it, and then you just go ahead and tighten them in sequence, and then it'll just draw down there as you're doing it. It just feels wrong. It works, but And as you can see inside here, I went ahead and pulled these little plastic stuffer pieces out of the old one, dropped them in there. They were still good, so don't forget to put those back in place. So now the sump and the manifold are hooked up, and we're gonna look at the base plate. Okay, success. It's installed temporarily and running through its test menu. In instructions, it says special function menu. You press key B and C while powering it up, and it goes in, displays P0, and then you can run a self test, and it goes through all these steps to make sure everything's jamming, and then it ends and says, you know, I guess it says it's good. But these are the instructions. You can read this, but
it's up to step 13.
Yeah, step 13 is good to go. I left all the installation stuff off in case I had to take it back apart. Fingers crossed. No water cascading on the floor. It's good. So far, keep your fingers crossed. No leaks. Everything's jamming. By the way, in case you guys are wondering, I cut the tip of this off about 1/2 inch of where it was to give it some fresh hose. A little bit of WD-40 slid it back on. That's a high pressure fitting, so you can't just slide it back on. I don't think you would probably leak. New O-rings behind it. I think they're 22 millimeter. Again, those seem to be holding up pretty good. New float. All's right in the dishwasher world.